joined tonight by Neil Albrecht, who has been working around the clock, and George Christensen, who has been working around the clock at the county. And I thought the wisest thing to do would be to turn it over to Neil first and then George to talk about the incredible turn of events that we are experiencing right now. I don't know if I'm too much in the dark here. You tell me, do I need better lighting?
I think it's good lighting, Mayor.
Okay, all right. It's usually I'm in the daytime. At night, I'm not used to having this. So Neil, I'll turn it over to you.
Good evening, everybody. So obviously this is not good for voters, not in the city of Milwaukee and not in the state of Wisconsin. And what I'm referencing is the U.S. Supreme Court decision to overturn the decision that Judge Conley had made around extending the deadline for absentee voters from tomorrow's date, April 7th, until April 13th. This is problematic on multiple fronts. Probably first and foremost, that to a lot of voters, they're going to feel deceived in terms of what type of information was communicated to them by election clerks, by the media, by written instructions they have received with their absentee ballots. And since the time of that ruling, we have been communicating to voters that they had until April 13th to return their ballots, and they made decisions based on that information. So in the city of Milwaukee, I'm just going to ballpark the numbers here. We have issued roughly 100,000 absentee ballots. Of that number, approximately 55% or 55,000 have been returned. That means in the city of Milwaukee, there are still 45,000 absentee ballots. And of those 45,000, there are at least 15,000 who made requests on or just before this last Friday deadline to request an absentee ballot. There is absolutely no way that that population will have had the opportunity to receive their ballots, given postal delays, vote and return their ballots by tomorrow's election date. So very concerning about the status of those ballots. There's also another 15,000 or so that have more or less, we don't know why their ballots haven't been returned at this point, but we know that there were issues with postal delivery. I mentioned in our media event early today, ballots mailed around March 22nd and 23rd in particular have been reported to us by voters as never receiving those ballots. So we have been issuing literally hundreds, if not thousands of ballots reissuing per day to voters who never received their first ballot, with the instructions that they had until April 13th to return those ballots. And then finally, we have about 750 ballots, 750 to 800 ballots that are lacking witness signatures. We were going to seize that extension as an opportunity to work with those voters and take the necessary steps for them to be able to secure those witness signatures. So we really have a significant number of outstanding absentee ballots in the city of Milwaukee, somewhere around 45,000. To the public, we say, get those ballots in. They do have to be postmarked by tomorrow, by election day. So if you've got an absentee ballot and you haven't returned it yet, you have two options. You can return that ballot in the mail, make sure that it's postmarked by April 7th, or you can take it to one of the ballot drop-off sites in the city of Milwaukee. Those will be open tomorrow from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. And again, those sites are located at Zablocki Library, Bayview Library, Mill Road Library, Washington Park Library, and downtown at the Zeidler Municipal Building. If you don't have an absentee ballot in your possession at this time and don't have the opportunity to return it in the mail tomorrow or to take it to one of the drop-off sites, in other words, you're still waiting for that absentee ballot, or you're still waiting for some form of resolution with regard to receiving your absentee ballot, your only option to vote in tomorrow's election is to go to your voting center to cast your ballot.
Let me weigh in on a couple of these points. Neil, are you finished?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, Mayor.
Again, I want to thank Neil and his staff. This has been a very unbelievable day and the turn of events after Neil and his staff, along with others who have been working around the clock to try to ensure that we pull off this election during this pandemic. I am shocked by this turn of events, and I'm very disappointed. But now we have to, again, give the guidance that is most important for our residents and citizens so that they know what to do. And I think the most important thing that we can say tonight are, first, if you have an absentee ballot in your possession, there are 3 things that you can do with it. It has to be mailed and postmarked tomorrow. So you're going to have to see exactly when it gets picked up. If you put it in after the mail is picked up, the Supreme Court of the United States has said it will not be counted. On a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court of the United States said it will not be counted if it is not placed in the mail and postmarked by tomorrow. In addition, you can also put it in one of these drop spots that Neil talked about. There are 5 places that will be open from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. This is for your absentee ballots. And as Neil said, there are probably 45,000 of them that are still sitting out there because our return rate has been about 55%. Neil and his staff have put out 100,000 ballots, and we've gotten back 55% of them. So the locations to drop these off on the south side are at Zablocki Library and at Bayview Library. Downtown, it's the Zeidler Building. On the west side, it's the Washington Park Library. On the northwest side, it's the Mill Road Library. In addition, as I understand it, Neil, can voters also bring them to one of the 5 voting sites? Can they bring their absentee ballots to those sites as well, Neil, so people know?
We can collect absentee ballots at those voting centers. We just can't process them at those centers. So we can certainly be depositories. We will then transfer the ballots to where absentee ballots are being processed at the central count location. I would say don't wait until real late in the day, because we want to make sure that the ballot can actually be transported to the central count processing.
So again, if you have one, you can take it, Neil, so that people understand, can they take it only to the site where they would go to vote, or can they take it to any of these 5 sites?
They can go to any drop box in the city. They can go to any voting center in the city. You don't have to go to your assigned voting center. If you were going to be voting there, you can go to any voting center, whatever is the most convenient to you, and turn in that absentee ballot there.
But please do not wait till 8 o'clock. And if it's after 8 o'clock, you're out of luck, just to be clear on that. In terms of in-person voting, Neil, do you want to talk about the precautions that you have put into place? Because paramount to all of us here, and this is what's so disappointing with what's going on at the state and federal level, we're still in a pandemic, and there is no scientific exemption for voting. So what steps have you taken to protect the voters and to protect the workers at the sites?
So we have been, thank you, Mayor, we have been very fortunate. We've had a very meaningful collaboration with the Milwaukee Health Department. In fact, the Milwaukee Health Department will have between 3 and 4 staff members at every voting center tomorrow to ensure that all of the safety precautions are being fully adhered to by our election workers and by members of the public. So our election workers will be wearing gloves, they'll be wearing masks, they will be frequently actually after every voter, disinfecting the voting booths, frequently disinfecting all surfaces in the voting rooms, and they will be enforcing the social distancing that needs to occur in those voting rooms. Also, they will be limiting the number of people. It varies from one center to the next, but they will be limiting the number of people in the voting room to a number that allows for social distancing and does not exceed that capacity. So I feel very confident that we have done everything we can to reduce risk at these voting centers, all things considered, which is we are hosting a community gathering at a voting center amidst a pandemic.
So let's talk a little bit again, just so all the reporters have this, so that people, because there's still a lot of education out there. Our five sites are Hamilton High School, South Division High School on the south side, Riverside on the east and northeast side, Washington High School and Marshall High School as well. Those are the five sites. And what should voters do so they know specifically which one to go to? What would be the most effective way for them to know which of these five sites they go to?
So the most effective way to identify your voting site is to go to the myvote.wi.gov website. Again, it's myvote.wi.gov. You'll see a prompt at the top of the screen for identifying your voting site. Click that prompt, enter your address. It will tell you in the city of Milwaukee or anywhere in the state for that matter, where your voting site is on election day. So it will identify for you your voting center in the city of Milwaukee. If you don't have access to the internet or have difficulty accessing the site, you can also call 286-VOTE or 286-3491 tomorrow.
In terms of health for the people going to the polling places, again, the CDC has recommended people wear some sort of face mask or face guard. I would think that this would be a situation where you would absolutely want to do this, because there are going to be a lot of people, as Neil said, this is really not in conformity with the edicts that are coming from the governor or from the president of the United States. I would highly recommend people bring their own pen as well, so that we're not using the same pens for hundreds of people. So those would be the requests that I would have if you decide that you are going to go to the polls to vote tomorrow. I'll just say this, and then I'll answer any questions, and Neil can answer any questions. This is very disturbing to me. This is very disturbing to me because every other state in this country has been able to come up with a method for voting that protects public health and protects our democracy. For whatever reason, the leadership of our legislature has decided that it is not going to work with the governor, who I applaud for his courage in doing what he did today. I applaud Governor Evers because he is on the right side of public health and he's on the right side of history. And unfortunately, what you saw at the state Supreme Court and at the United States Supreme Court were two opinions that went right down the typical ideological lines. That is a problem. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
Well, Mayor, if I could just add, it is a sad day. I think it's a very sad day in the state of Wisconsin. I have interacted with people for weeks who have voted in every election since they were 18 years old. And many are seniors and many are going to be missing this election because of the game playing and the political manipulation that has occurred, and this state's refusal to actually move an election date and to afford those individuals the opportunity to maintain those records in which they have great pride and be able to vote in this election. A lot of seniors, a lot of people did apply for absentee ballots, but for a multitude of reasons, including an understaffed postal service, have not received their ballots. and they are self-confining for very good reasons. They are in a high-risk category, and they are going to lose their opportunity to maintain their voting records unless they literally place their lives at risk by going to a voting center tomorrow. And I think that is very, very sad. It's reprehensible that we are making people in this state make those choices.
If there are no questions, we thank you for joining us tonight.
I think we have, there are some questions in the margin.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead. I see one from Jeremy. Go ahead, Neil. That one's for you. Why don't you read it?
The state's website says that ballots can be issued by fax or email. Will the Milwaukee Election Commission do that for voters that haven't received their ballot but have requested one already? That's a terrific idea. The reality is, I don't think there is a clerk across this state that will have the capacity, including in the city of Milwaukee, to send out email absentee ballots to anyone that has a request tomorrow. So that is an option. I don't think for the voter or for municipalities, it's a very realistic option.
This is a question from Dick Rose. To a voter who is deciding between health and voting and choose health, what do you say to that person who chooses to stay home and feels disenfranchised? As Neil indicated, that there are many, many people in our community that have taken pride in being regular voters, and they've done so for 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And now for the first time, they are making a decision that they are not going to vote because of their health concerns. I'm not going to argue with them. I'm saddened about that. We have tried to do everything we can to persuade the legislative leadership to make our case to the governor, and we're very pleased that the governor saw what was happening here in Milwaukee. Bear in mind that we went from one case of COVID-19 on March 13th. That was our first case. And today we surpassed 1,000. That has just happened in 26 days, from one case to over 1,000. And for the leadership of our legislature to ignore this pandemic, a pandemic that has been recognized by the World Health Organization, a pandemic that has been recognized by President Trump, a pandemic where the Surgeon General earlier this week compared this week in America to Pearl Harbor week, and to say, all right, if you want to vote, you got to show up. That's not the America I know. That's not the America I know.
I think we have a question from Aaron Maven, Mayor, that I could probably answer. That I had estimated earlier this week that between 20 and 30,000 voters, members of the public, would turn out at the voting center. And did I see that number changing as a result of what has occurred with absentees or for any other factor? I don't know. It is very, very difficult to gauge what kind of turnout that we can expect for tomorrow. I have no question that some people who were waiting for absentees to come in the mail or who never received their absentee ballots will opt instead to go to their voting center. We've gotten those inquiries. But I also think a lot of people who were waiting for their absentees who had chosen to vote by absentee had made that choice for a very good reason, and that is they are too full of fear. They're too fearful to risk their health by appearing at a voting center. And those individuals will not vote, and they will not then boost voter participation at the centers.
Ted Perry has a question. Can you be specific about what time they have to be postmarked, and how can they assure that deadline is met? Obviously, you look at the post box you're at as to what time the last pickup is. What I don't know, and you might know the answer to this, Neil, is if the last pickup is after 8 p.m., is that valid? Does it have to be postmarked before 8 p.m.? Do you know the answer to
It
that
has to be
question?
postmarked by midnight. So anything postmarked by April 7th can be counted.
Next question from Jeremy. The missing ballots, are they bouncing back? Where are they physically going? Let me elaborate a little bit on what Neil said, because I've been receiving calls on this as well. It appears, from what we both have been able to discern, that on March 22nd and March 23rd, people who went to myvote.wi.gov and requested ballots through them, or maybe it's the city as well, but we know the dates, March 22nd, March 23rd, that those individuals may not have received ballots. We've tried to figure out what the problem is. Our records show that we have mailed them, if I understand that correctly, Neil. But the problem appears to be not my vote, so I apologize for that, not myvote.gov. It appears, we believe, to be at the post office. And one of the things that they have said to Neil is that just as everybody else is having staffing issues during this pandemic, they're having staffing issues. I don't know if you want to elaborate on that at all, Neil, or anything you want to add on that.
So as the mayor said, we really, I mean, I think it's important to note the landscape to all of this, that municipalities, including Milwaukee and the MyVote website, are not equipped for the volume of absentee ballot requests that came in. I mean, MyVote itself, the website crashed several times during the absentee ballot application period. We did identify, we have seen an extraordinary number of individuals contacting us who made absentee ballot requests. The two primary experiences that we were able to identify was they were in a batch that was mailed around March 22nd or 23rd, issued by us and taken to the post office, but never delivered to voters. We don't know what happened to those ballots, but we have been working with the people that were supposed to be receiving those ballots on reissuing them those ballots. And then again, they were, what was calming and assuring to them was that they were given an April 13th, an extension to be able to return those ballots. The other is we've had a lot of calls, worked with a lot of residents who believe they completed the entire application process on MyVote, including uploading their photo IDs, never received their ballots. When we go into their voting record, there's no record of their absentee ballot application coming in. And that's happened to city employees that I know who believe they completed the process in its entirety on MyVote, and but there is no record of it, no ballot issued. So we've got two pretty large categories of individuals who never received absentee ballots but did request them. We have been spending the last 3-4 days trying to rectify those situations and send out new ballots, but again, under the premise that those voters had until April 13th to return those ballots.
A question on, will you consider the results of this election legitimate in light of today's developments? We know that there's going to be an election, and we know that there are literally hundreds of people who are running for office for local races, from aldermen to county supervisor, to mayors to county executive. We know that there are many, many judges whose names are on the ballot. We know there's a Supreme Court justice race on the ballot. All of those positions will be filled. And so regardless of how we feel about this process, which we feel very passionately about how wrong it is, our government is going to continue. Our government's going to continue at the local level, at the county level, and at the state level. What I would ask people to do is to remember exactly what happened today in our state. And I can't stress this enough. Every other state in this country that dealt with this issue at this time has been able to deal with it in a way that protects the right to vote and does everything it can to protect the health of its citizens. Wisconsin is the only state that has failed to do that. The question from Tom Durian: with the number of absentee ballots out there and the changes, do you think we will see telling results starting tomorrow night? Neil?
Oh, I would interpret the question to mean, do you think that election results will be released tomorrow night? We're actually waiting on communication from the Wisconsin Elections Commission on that. But considering the voiding of the extension on the deadline for absentee ballots, my perception at this time, based on waiting for the WEC to react to the rapid changes that occurred today, would be we will be producing and releasing election results tomorrow. Might be a good opportunity to bring George Christensen in on the county level. Just George, in terms of what you're hearing and whether the county will be releasing election results tomorrow.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Mayor. What I'm hearing currently, as Neil said, is we're waiting for guidance from the Wisconsin Election Commission. However, my understanding is as that guidance comes, there will be no results released tonight or tomorrow night. We will be instructing municipalities to not send in results because there may be some absentee ballots that are postmarked tomorrow still. But again, Neil's right. We need to wait to see what Wisconsin Election Commission says.
All right. Thank you all very, very much for joining us tonight. Thank you. Have a good evening.